All right, we have a couple more advanced things to kind of talk about here when it comes to animation. Last class or last time I did teaching about sort of the basics of After Effects, we talked about the idea of raster images. Okay, and reminder, a raster image is an image built with pixels. Okay, examples of that would be like a JPEG, PNG, WebP, PSD, something like that. And we learned that if you take a raster image and you blow it up in terms of the scale, it actually will distort. So here I have this bird, okay? And it's a PNG, which is a raster image. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to hit S for scale, and it's scaling up. And, as it gets larger, about 1,000%, look how distorted it looks, right? You see how that you get these kind of blurry edges. It's kind of stair-steppy, all that, kind of not great stuff, right? But we also talked a couple weeks ago about the concept of vector graphics. Vector graphics are built with paths instead of pixels. Programs like Adobe Illustrator or we talked about Figma no, not Sigma, but Figma can build graphics with vectors. Um, so here I have something that's an EPS file, and this file is also scaling. And you'll notice that it kind of getting that same issue where it's starting to distort when it gets larger. But vectors have this benefit is vectors can actually scale infinitely without being distorted. So what I'm going to do is in your timeline, there's this area called toggles and switches. Okay, it looks like this. We haven't really used it yet, although we will eventually. But we're going to go to this one that's called uh, vector layer continuous raster. Kind of looks like a little star. And I'm going to click on this. And look how sharp that looks now. Okay, this is before, this is now. So, what I'm trying to say here is if you think you're going to be scaling up something really large from its default size as part of your animation, you might want to consider doing it as a vector, meaning maybe you create it in Adobe Illustrator or find something that's a vector format like a SVG or an EPS format that can be worked with. That way it can be scalable. Okay. If you were wondering how you can, if you're not using Adobe Illustrator, but using maybe Figma, how you can bring that into Adobe Animate. Here I made this graphic in Figma. We talked a little bit about how to do basic setups in Figma. I'm going to highlight it, and if this is in design mode, I'm going to go highlight it, and under this area called export, I'm going to switch this from PNG, which is a raster format, to SVG, which is a type of vector format. And I'm going to hit export. Uh, Now, unfortunately, Adobe Illustrator, or sorry, Adobe After Effects will not work with a SVG vector format, but you can convert this easily into what's called an EPS, which is another type of vector format. So for instance, I put a little link in today's modules to this website called converto.co or Convertio. And what you can do is then click to get the SVG file and then switch it to under image. Let's switch this. Oops, where'd it go? Vector EPS. And I'm going to convert this to an EPS. And I'll download it. Now that it's an EPS, it can be brought into After Effects. Okay. I'll bring it into our project here. So it's very small. I didn't. And if I were to scale this up, Once again, you're getting kind of that distortion, but if I click on the continuous raster option, boom. So you can, create something in Illustrator, export it as an AI or an EPS and bring it into After Effects. Or if you're using something like Figma, it's one extra step. You'll have to convert it, download it as an SVG and then go to a website like the one I showed you and convert it. But then you could bring it into After Effects as I just showed you. Okay, so just showing you kind of uses of vector graphics. Might be something you might want to take advantage of. All right, next thing is working with multiple keyframes. Okay, so at the moment, every time we've done something, like let's say we were animating something. Let's say I had a circle. The circle moved from left to right. Okay, or as I would say, it had like a point A to point B. Okay. What we're trying to do is something a little bit more complex, where you go from point A to point B, and then point B to point C, and then point C to point D. So in other words, what you're trying to do is something that goes like this to this to this. Okay, kind of making like a Z shape here. So the way we can do that is with multiple keyframes. I'm going to hit P for position. And what I'm going to do is, position this in place like I wanted to. Click on the stopwatch to set a keyframe. Then I'm going to go to 1 second. And once again, let's change its position. And it makes a second keyframe. We've done this before. Okay. Then I'm going to go to point number 3 and then move it again. And so now it's point 1 or point A, point B, point C, and then point D. So it's going to go boom, 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 boom. So if I play this back, boom, boom, boom. Okay. So, we can add multiple keyframes. If you want to remove a keyframe that you've added, it's very simple. Highlight it, press the delete or the backspace button. You can also click on the little option here to add or, that would remove it. In addition to, so I'm going to do another one where I'm going to make this go from big to small to big. All right. So, well, what's happening here is while this is moving, this is also going to enlarge or go from big to small back to big. So once again, kind of working with multiple keyframes. And having multiple keyframes is going to make this feel a little bit more, definitely going to make it feel more sophisticated. Maybe I'll do something like this, where it's like I start, rotate, rotate the other way. So I'm adding multiple keyframes. So when you add this with all the other multiple keyframes, it starts to make this look a little bit more natural. Okay. All right. Let's talk about speed. Okay, here's this car, and this car is going at a certain speed. It's going from point A point B to point C. Okay. Now, speed is just how fast is it going. Now, let's just say for the sake of argument, I'm going to take this keyframe and that's directly in the middle. So it's like this is a total of 3 seconds. This is 1.5 seconds in. I'm going to grab this and move it to the left. Okay. And if I play this back, I want you to notice something. So when I play it back, notice how point A to point B went really fast. And then point C to point D, or sorry, point B to point C went really slow. Okay, why did that happen? Well, let's talk about that. The answer to that question that I just posed is really physics. So speed is distance divided by time. Okay, so for instance, hypothetically, if you go 100 miles and it takes you 2 hours, then if you do out the math, you went 50 miles per hour, right? Now, let's just say you still go 100 miles, but now instead of taking 2 hours, you take 4 hours. Well, you went the same distance, but you had more time. It took you longer to do. And if you do out the math here, you were going slower. You were going 25 miles per hour. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. If you go the same distance you did before, but you did slower, it would take you longer, but you had more time, you can go slower. The same thing is maybe you went that same 100 miles, but now instead of 2 hours, you have 1 hour to go that 100 miles. Then you would have to increase your speed. Your speed would go to 100 miles per hour. And once again, if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like if you have less time to go the same distance, the only real way to do that would be to increase your speed, right? And so that's why when you have less time, you go, for a certain distance, you're going faster, but if you have more time, you're going, you can go slower. That's actually what's happening here. Right now, when I had this, both sides gets it's going the same distance on either side and it has the same amount of time. When I bring two keyframes closer to each other, that means whatever action this is going faster. Okay. Or in other words, it has less time to do the same action. When it has less time to do the same action or the same distance, it has to do it faster. The other thing is also by pulling this to the left, this increases the amount of time between point B and point C. So because there's more time between point B and point C, it's actually going to go slower. Okay. Let's pretend I do it the other way around. I want you to think about this before I do it. Stop the video or whatever you think. I'm going to take this and move it to the right, and I want you to think about what's going to happen. Pause, think about it. Use the noggin. All right, now when I play it back, what should happen is it's going to go slower because it has more time to do the same action. And then point B to point C is going to go a lot faster as it does there. All right. So just keep in mind that when you can add or subtract keyframes, you can move them around. By moving two keyframes closer to each other, whatever action they're doing is going to go faster. And if they're further from each other, by spacing them out, the action will go slower. Okay, so I want you guys to try that out. That was 7, 8, and 9, please.